Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. This is First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Penovich. Hope you had a great Labor Day holiday. It's September, and as you would expect, the tropics are heating up. Obviously, all eyes on Gordon right now. But the good news is Gordon is not a huge system. It's not a powerful system. It's still going to pose a pretty significant threat for parts of the Gulf Coast, and I'll explain why. Here's a system on the infrared satellite image. Certainly not going to win any beauty pageants for tropical systems. This is a very lopsided, kind of ugly-looking system. It does have a lot of convection, but it's all, or thunderstorm activity, all on the right side or east side. The circulation is here, and there's a wind shear going on. There's actually a little dip or trough here in the central Gulf of Mexico, which is shearing this system or pushing all the storms off to the right or the east. Here's the visible image, and you get a little better idea where the circulation center is. It's right here under this very small section of thunderstorms that are trying to perk back up. In fact, it looks like right in there is where our circulation is. So somewhere in there, we're actually getting some storms of fire up on the east side. So very lopsided system. The flow into it, some drier air being pulled off the land. So not a really gorgeous looking system, but because of the way the coastline is shaped and where it's going, this does pose a pretty significant threat for storm surge. Now, you can see the storm track. Don't focus on the individual lines. Look at the impacts, how far they will be from the center line. The way that the coast is shaped here, I worked in southeast Louisiana for 4 years, and weak systems approaching from this direction, the Chandelier Sound, Chandelier Islands area, you end up getting a lot of water pushed into this funnel area. So all the bayous, the lakes, the tidal basins all end up getting water because at the same time, we've had rain the last couple of days in southeast Louisiana. We're going to get rain ahead of it. The water can't go offshore because it's getting pushed in from the storm surge. And so you end up with basically each high tide gets higher, each low tide is not as low. And so you end up with a lot of coastal flooding. So storm surge is still a huge potential issue with this system, even though the winds aren't likely going to be that bad at all. I mean, marginal hurricane, upper tropical storm force, which will knock down trees and power lines, but we're not looking at widespread damage from wind. It's really the flooding concerns that we're watching with this system. So that's Gordon. No impact for the Carolinas, obviously, but here is Florence, which is another system out there that could become a hurricane. It's been out there for a while, and Florence is kind of interesting. I don't think it's going to have an impact on the East Coast, but it could give us a close call. I actually think the next system that's just coming off the coast of Africa might be something more to watch over the next couple of days. So here's the ensemble tracks for Florence, which basically means these are running all of the models for the European ensembles and then looking for the mean. This is what we do a lot. Ensemble forecasting is much better than deterministic single track forecast. So if you get an idea here, you can see the clustering of all of them recurving. Now, there's a couple that try to go back to the west, but I don't think that's likely because there's going to be a big ridge of high pressure parked over the east coast, which makes it incredibly difficult for this system to plow into. Now, it could cut underneath it, but I think it's going to end up going to the northeast, and I'm going to show you why. I mean, when we look at the water vapor loop, this is the water vapor loop. You can see the U.S. here. Here's Gordon, obviously, down there. You can see our ridge here. Well, notice this little upper trough, or maybe a tutlow out here. You see this thing spinning right here. I think that's going to create enough of a weakness in the ridge between the two of them that we're going to see this Florence recurve. This is actually going to undercut, but you can actually see the circulation. Look at the clockwise flow here over the East Coast. This is why we're going to be baking under the heat and humidity. Now, just to show you that, give you an example, this is a look at the 500 millibar chart. Look at the monster ridge parked over the southeast. You don't get tropical systems that come barreling in to a ridge. They hit it and they usually go around or they go this way. So you could see the little 588 there, that's actually Gordon going underneath the ridge and then moving around the western periphery of it up into the central U.S. You don't really see Florence doing much. It looks like Florence ends up way out here, which looks a little crazy. And a little piece of low pressure moves down over the Florida Straits, which I think is that upper low that I just showed you. So you can see over time the ridge over the southeast, it's pretty persistent. This is why it's going to be so hot and humid for us on the East Coast, and probably why we're not going to see a tropical system, at least in the near term. You see the ridge kind of building back up next week. And again, now this is just one look at the guidance, but that's a pretty persistent ridge on the East Coast, which would make me think getting a landfalling tropical system would be incredibly difficult until that ridge weakens or shifts a little bit out into the long range. And then here's another view, the same thing, 500 millibar chart, just a monster ridge. So I don't think we're going to see a lot developing there. But what could happen over the next, I'd say, week or so is we could see this second or third system off the coast of Africa be more of a player. So you see Gordon, here is Florence, and again, this is the probability of tropical depression formation. You can see the movement of these systems. You see Florence moving into the middle of the Atlantic, and then look at our next system. So this would be Hermine if it would develop, and then that has a little bit more southerly trajectory, which means it has a little better chance to slip under the ridge here. I think this is a mess because there's a weakness in the ridge and then it's trying to slide under. But in both cases, it looks like the ridge would deflect any systems heading to the east coast. So I'm not buying into that right now. The other thing to remember about systems way out here in the Atlantic, they haven't been sampled by surface stations, upper air stations. So the model guidance is kind of more general. You don't get into the specifics of it, but it's something to keep an eye on. Again, we're in the peak of hurricane season, so it's certainly something to bear watching over, I'd say, the next week or so. So if you have plans on the coast anytime in the next couple weekends, as always, you should stay abreast to the weather. So there's Gordon. We'll keep an eye on it. Gordon should make landfall. Let me show you real quickly. Later this evening or into the overnight hours. This is going to be the 1 o'clock position right here with winds gusting to 90, but hurricane force. And then this is going to be at 1 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. So sometime tonight, it should make landfall somewhere on the Mississippi Gulf Coast as a Category 1 or a strong tropical storm. So if you live in this area, please take full precautions for a strong tropical storm, minimal hurricane, especially in those coastal sections. There will be flooding. Don't let your guard down, even though the system isn't that strong. Remember not to focus on the line track or what we call the system. Focus on your local impacts, and impacts here could be higher than what you think for this type of system. Of course, I'll be covering this throughout the week on NBC Charlotte, and you can keep updated on my Facebook and Twitter feed as we get you through hurricane season 2018. Have a great Tuesday, everybody.